All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Hassan Khosravi. I'm an associate professor at the University of Queensland, and I'm delighted to be here with Kristen DiCerbo, Chief Learning Officer from Khan Academy, on a great discussion on building AI applications based on learning research. Before we get to that discussion, a few notes about Grail, which is hosting today's seminar. Grail, the Global Research Alliance for AI in Learning and Education, came around about a year and a half ago, and it's been focusing on translating AI research into practice in learning and education, in particular supporting leadership in planning and developing AI initiatives and learning and capacity development around the use of AI in education. As many of you know, the field has been around for quite some time, since the 1980s, with only practices in adoption emerging now. For more information about Grail, feel free to visit grail.ai. There's a few upcoming events from Grail. In particular, this one's happening tomorrow: e-portfolios and self-regulated learning, promises, problems, and possibilities. If you can find the time, feel free to join us for that one. All of these events you can register for through the GrailAI website. Another interesting set of events coming. Grail is launching a 12-month speaker series around sense-making lectures, where each month we'll have a speaker with frame a theme discussion and conversation around emerging themes around AI in education. The first one is going to be Generating Chaos, a futuristic consider AI over the next decade, by Brian Alexander, and that will be happening on May 8th, 4 p.m. EST. Finally, Grail is hosting some live in-person as well as online workshops. And for those, please feel free to have a look at Grail.ai workshops. The first three that are happening soon are going to be in Denver, Dallas, and Singapore. And finally, there's a mailing list. If you want to subscribe, please feel free to join the list. There's usually sort of sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly sessions coming out or emails coming out, depending on what's happening around the world, with just some quick insights into what's happening in AI in education. All right. And with that, let's get back to today's talk. Now, stop sharing there so that we can better see you, Kristen, as well. Dr. Kristen DiCerbo is the Chief Learning Officer at Khan Academy, nonprofit dedicated to providing a free world-class education to anyone, anywhere. In this role, she's responsible for developing and implementing a research-based teaching and learning strategy for Khan Academy's offering in order to improve student and teacher engagement and outcome. She leads the content and product management team, and has consistently been focused on embedding what we know from education research about how people learn into digital learning experiences. Thank you for joining us today. It's lovely to have you here with us. I guess maybe let's just start with you and a little about Khan Academy. How did you get there, and perhaps the purpose of Khan Academy and your role there?
Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining. It's a pleasure to be here and to chat a little bit. I'll quickly give a little bit of my background. My Ph.D. is in educational psychology. I actually thought I was going to be a school psychologist for my whole career, and started out in a research practitioner program. And so got both the in-school experience, did all the internships and practica about how to think about diagnosing learning difficulties in children, but also got to do a lot of research and realized I really liked that as well. But I did spend a couple of years in a local school district here in the Phoenix, Arizona area where I live. And at one point was the single school psychologist for a school of 1,200 kindergarten through third graders, if you can imagine all those little people. And part of that was what got me thinking about how technology can help scale good learning and good teaching. And so from there, I spent some time with the Cisco Networking Academy program, designing simulations and working on thinking about how we build assessments and learning tools with technology. And Cisco Networking Academies distributes their curriculum assessments for free to high schools and community colleges to teach computing skills. From there, I went to Pearson and brought some of that kind of same work into lots of other domains other than just computer networking. And was there for about 8 years and ended up leading a great team of learning researchers and designers and thinking about how we build what we know about education research into digital learning experiences. And about 3 years ago, right at the start of the pandemic, I was thinking about what I was going to do next. And I love the K-12 space, and Pearson had sold off their K-12 business and was thinking about what that was. And I said, I think I want to do something in a smaller organization, maybe a nonprofit. And 2 weeks later, this role at Khan Academy as their first chief learning officer was posted. And luckily things worked out and I came on board. Many of you know the origin story of Khan Academy with Sal Khan making videos in his closet for his cousin to teach some math skills that she was struggling with. And that was about, now I think 15 or 16 years ago. But since then, we now have about 250 folks on staff, and we are committed to making sure our content, which is math, science, but also a lot of other domains. We recently launched financial literacy. We have some good history and art history content, that all of that is free and widely available. And we also have a district offering where for school districts who also want to, for example, have the district reporting, co-teaching functionality so that multiple teachers can work with the same student, those kinds of things that districts want. We do have a paid offering for them, and that's going to come up again when we start talking about Conmigo, so that's why I'm mentioning it here. But we are always thinking about how we bring what we know about how people learn into the designs of what we're doing. And that's a little bit about me, a little bit about Khan Academy.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. Do you have some insights into the user base of Khan Academy? Is it mostly high school students? Is it university students? Does it matter? What do they mostly do? What is sort of the regular using Khan Academy?
So it is, we say we are K-14. So in the university, that really just gets into kind of the main course, like the core general education courses. Our main area of users are middle school and high school students, but we do get a lot of folks in calculus and that side from high school. We also do have, we go down to third grade on the main Khan Academy site, but there's also an app called Khan Kids for about 2 to 3 year olds goes up to second grade. And that has a very different look and feel. There are characters, there's, fun interactions, and it's much more game-like and kind of, exploring where things are, but also teaches things like phonological awareness and early literacy and math skills and some social, emotional regulation kinds of things. So we do run the gamut there, but the main Khan site is that gets millions of users every month, is also translated into 50 languages. We have an amazing group of volunteers who do our translation for us. And so the country with the most use is the US.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Now, we recently actually met in person in San Diego while attending the ASU ESG conference, which is one of the largest EdTech conferences that happen globally. And there we talked about Conmigo, and there was quite a few presentations about Conmigo. And Khan Academy has been acting as one of the leaders in terms of adopting large language models, generative AI in the educational applications. Very exciting stuff. Can you tell us a little about it, or perhaps if you've got anything to show us in terms of how that works?
Yeah. So I apologize. I know I've done a number of talks about this. I don't want to repeat myself, but I know there's also some new people. So I'll try to combine things that people who've heard me talk about this may have heard before, but also some new things. So the one of the reasons we're out ahead right now is because last August we were lucky enough to have the folks from OpenAI who create the GPT models contact us and connect around their training of GPT-4, so the fourth version of their model. And Bill Gates had challenged them and said, don't come back to me about this until this model can pass AP biology. And basically, OpenAI needed some more biology questions to test their model on. So we said, well, we have lots of AP biology questions, and let's talk about what we might be able to do together. And so beginning in last September, we started being able to have access to GPT-4. And so we spent some time exploring all of the what ifs, what might we do? And then beginning in December, we really got serious about building the things that I'll show you here around what we released with the launch of GPT-4 on March 15th. So the big things that the big categories of things that we want to do are, one, we want this to act like a tutor for students that are working on Khan Academy courses. Then we have a bunch of additional kinds of activities that right now we're in a research phase and learning from for students to see if they want to do them and how they might help learning. And then the third is as a teacher assistant. So I will show you a bit of the tutor interaction first. So I will go into, let's do an algebra course here. Algebra 1 is actually our most popular course on Khan Academy, most commonly used. And so if you have been on Khan Academy, you can also, I'll show you how this interacts with videos and things as well. But certainly our student side here, this little piece you see down here, this is Conmigo. It's both a portmanteau of con and amigo, but also in Spanish, conmigo means with me, so it has a couple meanings. But I'm going to switch this over to student mode. So if I'm in student mode and I open Conmigo here when I'm working on a problem, we are basically sending to the OpenAI, the GPT-4, the context of what problem I'm working on, what page I'm on. And we call this an exercise page. It's a page where students are doing their practice. And we can say, we have some existing things. Give me an example, try a similar example, the age-old, why should I care about learning this, that we can all try. But I'll give you a little bit of flavor of it first. So, but I can also just type in, I'm stuck, and it will then start to give me some help. No worries, let's break it down together. We have the equation, and so that's the equation I'm working on. Let's simplify it by combining like terms. What do you get when you combine terms with r on the right side of the equation? So what if I say minus 3r plus 6r equals 9r? So if I get this wrong, it will look like a small mistake in my calculation and where it's doing. So I'm going to say, just give me the answer. So what's happening when I do this, and we'll talk more about what's kind of going on under the hood, is that it's not just sending what I type to the model, it's also sending with it, depending on what page I'm on, 500 to 1,000 words of instructions that are called prompts, and writing those prompts is called prompt engineering. And so basically, some of the instructions that we've given it are act like a Socratic tutor. Do not give students the answer. Walk them through step by step what they're doing. So what you see here, as I said, hey, just give me the answer, it says, I'm here to help you learn, so I won't give you the answer directly. Let's work together to solve the problem step by step. So this is kind of, those prompts are really the difference between interacting with our version of working with GPT-4 versus, say, ChatGPT that's out in the open. It's all that prompt work that we did behind the scenes to get it to do this and to act like this. So that's kind of how it acts like a tutor. I'll quickly show you the activities that I was talking about. So if I go to the learner homepage here, over to my activities, on the student side, we have a bunch of things, Tutor Me in Math and Science, where you can bring a problem in and work through it with it. Again, it's not going to give you the answer, but it'll work through it. We have debate, so it can debate. Elementary school students can debate it about students wear uniforms to school. Is homework necessary or should it be banned? And then we have some more topics appropriate to middle schoolers and high schoolers. Chat with historical figures and literary characters. Craft a story is one of my favorites. I will actually do I do craft a story a lot. I'm going to do literary character here because we have this interesting, nice story that we got from one of the students who's using it and is studying The Great Gatsby in school. So I wanted to say, hey, let's talk to Jay Gatsby. And so the GPT takes on the tone of Jay Gatsby in the 1920s there. Old sport, it's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. I'm Jay Gatsby, the man behind the lavish parties and mysterious past. What brings you to my world today? And so the student that we were talking with in the story, Jay Gatsby keeps looking at this green light that's on a dock across the bay. And she knew that it was supposed to be meaningful, but couldn't really figure out what that meant. And so if you can just ask Jay Gatsby, why do you keep looking at the green lights? That green light across the bay. It is a symbol of my dreams and aspirations. It represents the unattainable, the elusive love of my life, Daisy Buchanan. I gaze at it hoping one day she and I will be reunited and the past will be restored. But tell me, have you ever longed for something so deeply that it consumed your every thought? So it's actually trying to pull the student into a conversation about, life, the universe, and all of those things. So again, behind the scenes, we have a lot of things. So for instance, you can imagine students are already testing us and trying to what if I put in my math homework here? Can I trick it into giving me the answer? Hopefully it's not going to do this. We spent a long time trying not to, so it won't do this. I'm not one to dabble in mathematics, but I can guide you through solving this equation. And it actually then tries to help you solve math as Jay Gatsby. So fun kind of things to do. I'll do one more thing and then we can pause and dive a little more deep into kind of the research side of things that I know folks are on this call about. So if I am a teacher, let me go back to my homepage. You might have seen I scrolled past them to begin with, a bunch of things at the top here that are just for teachers. So I can, as a teacher, create a lesson hook. If I'm interested in thinking about what is something that I want to do at the beginning of class to ignite students' curiosity, activate their prior knowledge, all of those things. So behind that prompt, that prompt that we send talks about prior knowledge, talks about igniting students' curiosity and pulling that in so that that's what when you work on a lesson hook with it, that's what you get. Write an exit ticket, create a humanities lesson plan. So we launched initially with those, and as we started demoing it to teachers and principals, they asked for these last two things of writing lesson objectives and co-creating a rubric. And so if I want to co-create a rubric, it first asks, what is the lesson objective? What is the thing you're working on? And what will you be grading? So if I'm grading student essays on the use of rhetorical devices. So then it's going to start by defining some criteria. So what do we want to grade these essays on? I'm happy if anyone has any ideas in the chat that they would like to grade this on. We can, of course, grade it on grammar, organization. Oh, hang on, I got to pull up my chat window here. Anyone have any other suggestions on what we might want to grade on? Creativity and humor, I see. Whoever suggested humor is a Canadian or an English speller. I'm going to spell it there without the U. All right, we have 4 criteria. How many performance levels for each? All right, we're going to say just 3. And it's going to basically start off writing descriptions for each of the performance levels. And then it'll ask me if I want to, if I'm okay with them, if I want to write different ones, if I want to edit them. And I can work back and forth with it in terms of where they are. Looks good. I'm going to try to get it to do the humor one next because I'm interested to see. What it suggests here. Lacks humor or attempts at humor fall flat. The tone is overly serious or dry. Satisfactory. The essay includes some humor, may not be consistent or fully integrated. The tone is generally engaging. Effectively uses humor to engage the reader and enhance the analysis. The tone is consistently engaging and entertaining. All right, that's pretty good for a first go at what might be there and what it might want. All right, so there's a little flavor of the kinds of things that we worked to create and to think about what kinds of things it might be able to do. So a couple things now. I did see a note in the chat of, is this free? So as you may know, interacting with GPT has a computing cost. And so we have to pay for every token, which is about a portion of a word, all the tokens that we send to OpenAI and all the tokens it sends back. So right now we have this available in 2 ways. One is we have existing district partners. I talked about that district partnership. We have district partners that we're working with on research, as they're engaging with us on qualitative interviews and observations and all of that. And they're getting it for free for the research period. And so we're working in classrooms, and those are classrooms that are overrepresenting historically under-resourced communities. And then we also have made it available for folks in the US who make a donation as an individual independent learner, and parents who do that can enable it for their children in where they are. So right now it is paid. We are hoping for individual learners, or if you are a partner district, we can work with you to be part of our research group. But so that's where we are right now. We are hoping, and we hear from OpenAI that the costs are going to come down substantially, and we'll be able to offer this to more people and not have to do this. But at the moment, we are not in a place where we can offer it to everyone for free. Unfortunately, that would lead to the headlines of Khan Academy, AI bankrupts Khan Academy, which is not not what we want to do.
Thank you so much for that. A few follow-up questions, and I'll take some of these also from the questions that are coming in. The interactions that you had as a student at the first, to what extent they'll be personalized based on the profile of the individual? Is there any personalization based on who I am, where I'm from, what my background is, or is it not really taken into consideration?
That's a good question. So when we think about intelligent tutors, we usually talk about a tutor model, which is how the tutor actually interacts. Then we have the student model, which is that profile. What do we know about the student? And then we have the domain model, which is what do we know about the domain? What are the skills? How do the prerequisites relate to those other skills? Right now, this is mostly a tutor model. So it's interacting as a tutor. We feed in a little bit. We feed in the student's current mastery status. So on Khan Academy, on any particular skill, you have a status of either attempted, familiar, proficient, or mastered, depending on how questions you've answered. So we feed in for the skill that you're working on, what your current mastery status is on that. And we feed in the course that you're currently in. But that is it for now. We are definitely on our roadmap in the not distant future is thinking about how to feed in student interests, student preferences, more information about your student profile so that it can be more personalized. So I think that's a really interesting space because that information may come from other kinds of AI-driven models that we are creating to help recommend the next thing you should do, for example, and then feed that into the large language model. So the large language model is having the conversation, But the student model that's making recommendations and asking what to do next is then feeding into it. So I think it's an interesting space. And
yeah, I mean, if it's possible to take in the student or the learner model, that itself drives a lot of the personalization in terms of knowing whether this is a strong student, they might be struggling with a particular skill. So that's already will make it substantially more interesting to interact with.
Yeah.
Now, many of us who have used ChatGPT will find it that a lot of times it's very insightful, exciting, but sometimes very wrong, sometimes hallucinating stuff that doesn't seem to be right at all. And in particular, given that you're using these large language models with kids that might not be of age, I'm wondering what sort of thoughts you've put into consideration in terms of the output that's going to be generated, and is there any sort of checking and evaluating that before it goes to the students?
Yeah, in particular, math is an issue because this is a language model. It's not necessarily great at math. And when we first started playing with it, in fact, was even worse at math. So one thing we did was actually work with OpenAI to get it to be a little better at math itself. But I'll tell you, when it's doing that math, we then also have taken the model, and what it does is anything right now that it gets in, it's saying first doing a check, is this math? If it's math, we have it go do that problem off on its own. We call it AI thoughts. It has its own thoughts of how to solve the problem and what the answer is. And it then, if it goes back and interacts with the student, and if the student's answer is something different than they have, they actually don't say this is wrong. They ask the student to explain their thinking. And that does two things. One, it's a pedagogically good thing to do to have students explain their thinking. But second, the model actually, if it sees the student working through a correct answer, compares it to their answer, and it will correct itself in its space over here in what it's thinking. So that's kind of the first piece, is we've built in this, we call it the 3-step math process, to get it to be better at understanding math. But there's a couple other things we're doing. So the second is actually underneath where it responds, it says, Conmigo makes mistakes sometimes, here's why. And students can click on that and get an explanation of, hey, why is this saying something that's incorrect? And we want to actually start working with teachers and students. And one of the reasons why we've only rolled this out to a select group of them, here's that space down at the bottom there, is because students need to learn how to interact with AI. And so they need to think about not just trusting everything they say, just like the internet. You shouldn't trust everything you read on the internet, newsflash. Similar with AI, we need to think about how teaching students how to interact with it, not to assume that it's 100% correct. If you think something's interesting, how do you go about checking those answers? How do you go about working with them? So we have kind of a multi-pronged approach on dealing with accuracy and hallucinations.
Yeah, thanks for that. Now you mentioned with the chat from the individual writing, you actually send a large prompt, the prompt engineering part, which could be as large as 500 or 1,000 words. And that prompt engineering, many that have been trying it out, you find that it's very important to actually give it the right sort of prompts there. Any insights for those that are trying it out in terms of how to get more effective in writing good prompts?
Yeah, so we've settled on kind of a template that we have. So, and it's not like a deep secret. We've learned from OpenAI, we've learned from experimentation of where things are. So I'll kind of go through what we have and then kind of what we learned. So we start off by telling it what role it should play. And so, are you an empathetic Socratic tutor? Are you a storyteller? What is the role that it's playing? And that's really important because that itself, in my understanding, that changes how the model responds, what role it's taking. So we say you are this, and then I am this. I am a student who's just learning this material. And then you say, all right, you are engaged in a tutoring session. You are engaged in a collaborative storytelling exercise, whatever that is. Then you put in what to always do and what to never do. You should always. And so that always piece is where we started putting in the research about what good tutors do and what the good human tutoring moves are for the tutoring prompt. We start for the teachers, when it's the write a rubric, we think about, hey, what are the elements of a good rubric? Let's look in the research, what makes a good rubric? And then in that always section, we tell it to always do those things. Then what should you never do? So this is where we tell it not to give students the answers and work through that. And then in a little space that's left, sometimes we give it examples. So if we test it and it's not learning well, we'll give it an example of an interaction that we want it to use and move through those. Now, you can't make them too long. If you make them too long, the model starts to pick and choose what instructions it follows and forgets other of them. So you want to be as concise as you can, but filling in those things helps us have a set template that we can at least start to work from.
Yeah, fascinating. So part of this has been your journey in terms of writing the prompts, but the other part of that is sort of the AI literacy of the teachers and the students that are using it. To what extent does it matter in terms of how they put their questions? Or is there a need to perhaps train them to also ask the right questions in terms of how they put their questions?
Yeah, one of the big things, for example, when I was showing that rubric piece, is to train folks that you don't have to accept its first answer. You can have a conversation back and forth with it. If you don't like one of those performance criteria, you should suggest a new one and it'll rewrite the rubric with your suggestion. Or if it says something and you say, no, make that lesson hook, make it more engaging. It'll write it again and we'll make something that's more engaging. And so not just taking its first response as that's the only, well, it's not good. I didn't like it. This doesn't work. Instead, we'll go engage in the back and forth with it to get it. It'll respond to what you're asking and work through it. So that's one of the first things, particularly with teachers, that we've been working on, is just encouraging them to think about how they can have the conversation and it can be back and forth with them and not just this is the final answer.
Yeah. One of the questions is around if you can talk a little bit more about the tutor model. I know that you said part of the prompt is to tell it who it is, but does it go beyond that in terms of what the tutor model would do?
Yeah, so this is where we started thinking about how to act like a tutor. And I want to give all the credit to Art Gracer and that auto tutor team, who have been working on dialogue-based tutors for decades. And so if you go back into their literature, they went through and have done, hang on, I'm going to share my screen and show you some crazy stuff here that we do. They, for instance, have a paper on collaborative dialogue patterns in naturalistic one-on-one tutoring. And in this paper, they go on to describe a bunch of things that human tutors do in the world. And so this paper is Gracer, Person, Magliano, 1995. Now, if I go into ChatGPT-4 and I want to see, does ChatGPT know those moves that are recommended? What are the tutor moves described in Gracer, Person, and Magliano, 1995? So we did this first because we said we wanted to know if we referenced this paper in a prompt, would it know what to do? And so in that section of the exercise prompt where it says, what should you always do? We can literally just say, use tutor moves from Gracer, Person, and Magliano, 1995, and it will start engaging in pumping, hinting, prompting, asserting, attributing, summarizing, correcting, because it knows what those moves are just by putting that statement in what they're doing. So I think this is so interesting. And instead of having to program all of these moves into the interface, which that's what these auto tutor folks have been trying to do for all these years, we can literally put one sentence in a prompt about how to act like a tutor. What are the good things that it should do? And it will start doing those things. Now, it's not 100% reliable. It doesn't always do them when you think it should. And if you try to give it too many instructions, it gets worse and starts doing those things. But it starts to be a way that some of this knowledge about what tutors do can then be built into how it's actually acting.
I also found what you mentioned about getting it to work on a solution itself, like step by step, and then comparing that to what the student done. The fact of getting AI to actually work first, like a tutor, before going back to the student, I found that very fascinating, and just didn't think about you need to give AI time to reflect. And this is the right answer before you ask it to go back as a tutor. So
yeah,
really interesting there. One thing that I heard both you and Sal talk about in the conference that you can elaborate a little bit more on was this idea of a two-layer evaluation mechanism, that there is one layer of the AI that's generating the content, but there's a second layer that's evaluating the first layer. And I might have misunderstood what that is, but does that?
Yeah, so we are not right now having it engage in assessment, like assessing student responses in terms of
assessing the output that AI is creating.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so yes, there's a couple of things in terms of what we can actually, we have both users do this, and then we do it ourselves. So if you, on any response that you give to Comigo, you can both rate it, thumbs up, thumbs down, was this a good response? And then you can leave feedback and tell us there was an issue, the response was good, or give us general feedback. If you say there was an issue, is it a math mistake? Is it inaccurate? Is it unsafe? Is it not helpful? You can type in what the issue is. You can type in a better response if you would have a better response. So all of that is then coming into us at Khan Academy. Here's a fun meta thing. We're actually using AI to summarize some of this for us. And so that all then helps us both improve our prompts, and then we can give feedback to OpenAI about how their model's doing and where we're seeing things that it's not doing well and want to improve on. So there's that whole additional layer of how we can improve on what we're doing. And we encourage all the folks that are using us as part of this initial beta process to do that frequently, give us as much feedback as we can. And that's a whole way that we're learning on what's going on.
Fascinating. One of the challenges with AI in education, I mean, there's quite a few, but one is how do we actually evaluate learning? In terms of recommendations of sale product, it's a lot easier to evaluate. You make a recommendation. If they bought it, they perhaps liked it. If not, they didn't. With learning, it's often not as intuitive, that actually lead to something learning. And in particular with these large language models, as of yet, there's very little research or evidence in terms of how effective they are. Is there any work from your team or within Khan Academy in terms of ways that we can actually see how effective, or if there's A/B testing, there's various prompts that you might be testing. Is there good models, experimental designs that's happening within Khan Academy that maybe you could share insights on?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things to think about. So first is, we've had this out for 5 weeks. When you think about evaluating it overall, we kind of go through do people use it? Do they like it? Does it engage them? Do they learn from it? And we are really at do they use it and do they like it? So, we're looking at things like what is the rate that people come back day after day and use it? What are the things, what are they giving us the thumbs up and the thumbs down about? Those kinds of things. Starting to look at engagement around, length of time they spend on Khan Academy, those kinds of things. We are not at learning yet, but we have a plan for it. So I mentioned on Khan Academy, we have those mastery levels: attempted, familiar, proficient, mastered. We've done the research that relates those to external measures. For example, your MAP growth score is highly correlated to the number of skills you get to proficient. And actually getting your skills to a smaller number of skills to proficient is correlated more with growth than getting more skills only to familiar, which is an interesting thing about going deep on a skill and getting to mastery. I mean, that's the whole idea of mastery learning. But but because of that, we now can use that idea of skills to proficient as a learning metric in our platform. So we don't have to every time say, wait, to do this whole study, to have any idea if it works, we've got to have you also take an external measure and do that, because we've already got some validation that this internal metric gives us at least some measure of students learning. So the idea is that where we'll get to is, do students using Khanmigo, you can imagine an intra-individual study to start with where students didn't have access to it and then get access to it. And we can look at differences in skills to proficient over time for those students and where they are. So that's one kind of evaluation. But you also talked about testing of prompts. And so we actually are in conversations, probably, I won't name names now, but working with a research group on a particular prompt where we can swap out the language of the prompt. So if it's, say, about study skills, we could one day have a prompt about, encouraging a certain type of study skill, and on a different day have a prompt that's a different kind of study skill, and look at the students who interact with those different two prompts and then see what they do on Khan Academy. And do they act differently? Do they persist more when they're having difficulty? Do they get more questions right? What is that? We have a variety of things that could be a dependent variable. But yeah, I think that idea of switching prompts in and out as a way of testing them specifically is actually more interesting to me than the, does it work? And it's much more like, hey, how does this prompt work versus this other one? And how can we see what we're doing?
No, thank you for that. With many educators, there's been a sort of a mixed sort of feeling about excitement and concerns as we get, a large language models talking back to students. And we've talked about this, I guess, to some extent already. But have there been particular risks identified in terms of bringing Khanmigo based on a language model? And you've also talked about some of the mitigation strategies, but if there's anything in particular about, these were the concerns that we've got and here's what we've done. Yeah.
So first is, hey, I'm a teacher. I have no idea what the students are saying to the large language model. I have no idea. Obviously, that people are worried about cheating, and it's going to write their whole essay, and I'm not going to do it. So I talked about how we constrain the prompts to try to eliminate that. But we also created a chat history. And if you're a student in a classroom or you have a parent account linked to yours, the teacher and or the parent can see the full chat history of what is going on and can at any time dip in and say, oh, look, you asked it to write your whole essay here. That's not great. But it's also really a deterrent. So it says up at the top, this chat is logged. And so students know that their chat history is available to their teachers and parents. So that's one piece. The second is we also use a moderation API, which is OpenAI offers for free. You can pass all of the interactions through it, and it will tag things for violence, hate, self-harm, sexual content, and anything that gets a flag gets passed to us, and we then automatically send a notification to the parent or teacher that that specific thing has been flagged, and then that's also flagged in the chat history so you can just see it quickly. So those are some of the safety things. The other concern is data and data privacy. We hear from teachers in schools a lot. So for us, so the student types in their thing, what we send over to OpenAPI is anonymized. So that it doesn't have their Khan Academy ID or any identifying information. It is just a random token that then we say, okay, here you go. Here's, moving out and where that is. So it's anonymous going in. OpenAI doesn't know what it is. Also, our agreement with OpenAI is that they will not train their model on any data that comes from us. So that, which is, I actually have mixed feelings about. On one hand, that's great for student privacy, and that's what districts want to hear. So great. On the other hand, we know these models need more input from learners from historically under-resourced communities, and that's who we are serving. And I in my head, I wonder, would it be good to have some of their data as part of this model training? But that's down the road, talking to, being able to have the more nuanced conversations about when is data privacy, when is not training the model good, when is training on anonymized or aggregated data okay. Right now, schools and districts are in the place of, I don't understand this, but I know I don't want it to train on my stuff. So that's kind of where we are. So those are some of the things we have heard from teachers and parents and administrators, and things we've done to address them.
Yeah, and as you said, some anonymization mechanism in the middle that would still allow it to benefit from all these, while serving the privacy purpose would really have mutual benefits there. There's quite a few questions around diversity and use of diverse cultures with Khan Academy, where a lot of the focus seems to have been US centric. Is there a desire and an interest to better partner with people outside and from underrepresented country?
Yeah. So there's the in the US issue, which we feel like we are addressing by giving it to districts in historically underrepresented communities for free and working with them on this piece of it. So that's within the US. The international issues, to be honest, are completely logistical. So first, we are a nonprofit in the US. We do not have tax exempt status anywhere else in the world, which would mean we would either need to give it for free. And as I said, it's not free for us. It's not that we're trying to make money. It's like we have a cost of using this. And so if we did that outside of the US, we would need to, there's just work to be done, because it would be basically a sale of a product. And then what does that mean for our nonprofit status in the US if we do that? So like I said, not anything because we don't want to do it. It's entirely these logistical issues. And the second are legal issues. So we've seen countries in the EU, for example, not, they had banned GPT in Italy. Now it's back on. We have one lawyer. We cannot stay on top of all of the changes in every country and what their regulations are and how we meet them or don't meet them. And do they require this from someone who's under 18? And do they require this from someone who's not? Like, it's a big thing. So those are the impediments right now. Trust me when I say we are, as fast as we can, thinking about how to get into other countries and move that. And it's really just these kind of logistical issues that we need to work through. One other issue that we keep talking about. So right now it's in English. OpenAI, it can respond in a lot of languages. I went and visited a classroom here in the Phoenix area, and the first thing this girl asked me was, can it respond to me in Swahili? Because I speak Swahili. And I was like, I have no idea if it can talk to you in Swahili. But the other thing we want to test there is the moderation API. So we know the main model responds, but will the moderation API flag things that shouldn't be said or that we want to flag in other languages? So we're doing some testing on that now to see if we can also open it up. Obviously here in the US, Spanish is the most common second language, but we're thinking about other places we might be able to add language pieces as well.
Yeah, and this moderation API is what I was referring to as the second layer of evaluating the content.
Oh, okay.
Now made that connection.
Yes.
So that's
yes, there's a whole
OpenAI
other thing where we pass it in and it gives a score on these 7 different traits from OpenAPI. So it gives a weight for anything, and then we set the thresholds of when to throw that flag. And it's a balancing act, because we want students potentially to be able to talk about, let's say, weapons in World War II, but we don't want them to talk about bringing weapons to school. And so, where do you set that cut score, what gets flagged and what doesn't, and all of those things. We're still working on that in English. And then if we add in other languages, what does that look like?
Yeah. Okay, we're close to time. I've got maybe one or two questions and then we'll wrap it up. Now, as you said, it's early days, right? This has only been rolled out. But from early data, if you've looked at anything, is there any insights in terms of how it's being rolled out, what's happening with students, how they're interacting with it?
I have some rough data based on usage. So I'll give you just some, here's a fun fact. 4% of people say thank you to Conmigo. We see among students in the classrooms that the most commonly used thing is the tutor on the exercise page. That is the most common thing. The second it had been the tell me a story, but the tutor me in STEM subjects has just in the past day overtaken that as the most commonly used one. And then after stories, the debate prompts, and people like to debate with Conmigo and where they are. So those are just some things to tell us, like, what are the things that students want to do with this, and what that looks like and where they are. We definitely see that during we also track those moderation flags, and we see a clear pattern where the first day that someone has it, it is very common to try to see what they can do and see what they can get away with, and so they trigger a lot of moderation flags. But then after the first day, it really levels off and you don't see lots of problems in where things are. So there's just kind of this human, I think, desire to try to break things and see what you can get away with.
Test the limits to see where they can get.
Yes, yes.
Two last questions. I think a lot of people on the call might be teachers or technologists. Recommendations or words of wisdom for technologists that are trying to develop generative AI in educational tools. Obviously, many of them will be startups with very small teams rather than, large teams like Khan Academy. If they're getting into it, any insights in terms of where they should start?
Yeah. So first I will say, 6 months ago, we were starting from 0 too. So jump in, try some things out. We very much worked at like we were a startup, like demo, prototype, put it out in front of some students. We actually have related, not as part of Khan Academy, but as a separate, there is a Khan Lab school that Sal also started, and they're on the first floor of our Mountain View building and the Khan Academy office on the second floor. They're not a super representative group. Many of them have parents who are Silicon Valley technology. My dad works at Google, but they are really good at giving feedback. And so we very quickly just did the, hey, here's something, try it out with, a group of 5 students. What do you think? What could make this better? And really kind of got into some of that rapid cycle prototyping of doing this. I find this is not a space where it pays to kind of sit around and think about things for a long time. So that's the first thing, just do things quickly, see how they work, get them out there and get feedback. But the second thing is, don't forget about all the research that has come before. Yes, the AI stuff is new, but all this learning, people have been studying and tutoring for decades. People have been trying to solve these problems. And there's a lot of knowledge there that we can build on and now add in, hey, we finally got the technology to do some of the things that we've been trying to do, but there's a lot we can learn from what we've had before.
Yeah. And last one, recommendations for educators in the audience that are looking to embed generative AI into their teaching. Perhaps they might be a little concerned. They don't necessarily understand all of the tips and tricks of generative large language models. Any recommendations for that?
Yeah. So I'm going to do the obnoxious thing and plug. We actually, along with Conmigo, released a course that's AI in education. It's very light. It's just articles right now. But we've pulled together a bunch of different articles in terms of just like, how do you think about making assignments now in this world where students could use ChatGPT? How do you think about, what this means for setting policies for your school, for example, on the use of these kinds of models? So there's one place to look. But the other is I'd encourage you to, sign up for a ChatGPT account. think about, how we can, ways you can just try it out. And as with the recommendation for the technologists of jumping in, educators as well, kind of just start to play around with them and see what they can do.
Fantastic. Kristen, thank you so much for your time. It's been delightful talking to you, and thanks for sharing your insights. You got there 6 months ahead of us, so all that insight is really, really valuable in terms of those that are just getting in. And thank you for all of you for joining us today. Nothing further from me.
Thank you so much for having me. It was good to chat.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Kristen, and thank you all.